Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something really critical that's, well, sending ripples through global economics and tech.
We are indeed. We're talking about China's recent move to halt exports of rare earth elements.
Exactly. And this isn't just, another trade headline. It's got potentially huge consequences for, well, everything from our phones to green energy, even national security.
Absolutely. So if you're tracking current affairs, maybe especially thinking about how global events impact economic strategy, this is definitely one to understand.
For sure. So what was the immediate spark for this?
The trigger seems to be China's announcement back on April 4th. They said they were stopping exports of REEs and also, importantly, magnets made with them.
Magnets too, okay,
Yeah.
and specific elements.
Yeah, they mentioned yttrium and dysprosium specifically, and they explicitly linked this action to tariffs imposed by the United States.
Okay, right. So the U.S. was the stated target. But it sounds like the impact is much broader than just U.S.-China trade.
That's exactly right, because while the U.S. tariffs were the sort of catalyst, China hasn't put in place a specific licensing system just for the U.S.
I see. So it's more of a general halt.
Pretty much, which means we're seeing this broad disruption hitting, well, basically all nations that rely on these Chinese supplies.
Which brings us to the basic question, what exactly are these rare earth elements? The name sounds pretty exotic.
It does, doesn't it? Basically, rare earth elements, or REEs, are a group of 17 elements. They're chemically very similar.
17, okay.
Yeah, the 15 lanthanides you see on the periodic table, plus scandium and yttrium. Now, the rare part, that's actually a bit of a misnomer.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, they're relatively abundant in the Earth's crust, The issue isn't scarcity overall.
Ah, so what is the issue then?
The challenge is finding them concentrated in deposits that are economically viable to actually mine and process. They're spread out.
Got it. So widespread but hard to get at in useful amounts. Makes sense.
Exactly.
So with this export halt causing such a stir, our mission today really is to understand why this matters so much. Who's most affected? What are the global responses?
And we're drawing on reporting from the Indian Express for this deep dive to give everyone a clear picture.
Right. So let's start with why these REEs are so important. Why should we care?
Well, just look around at the tech we use every single day. Smartphones, EVs, wind turbines, LED lights, flat screen TVs.
They're in all of those.
Absolutely indispensable in many cases. Take neodymium and praseodymium, for example. They're critical for the powerful little magnets in electric vehicle motors.
Ah, okay. So without those, EV production could slow down.
It could face, significant hurdles. And it's similar for the bright colors and energy efficiency in our phone screens and TVs. Different REEs make those possible.
Right. It really hits home when you put it like that. It's not abstract at all.
Not at all. And it goes way beyond just consumer gadgets. They're absolutely vital for defense and aerospace, too. Think about things like precision-guided missiles, jet engines, sophisticated radar systems.
Okay.
Many of their advanced capabilities rely heavily on the unique magnetic and optical properties of certain rare earths. So disrupting the supply, that could seriously impact a nation's defense posture.
Wow. Okay, so it's a direct national security link. And I know there's a big connection to the green energy transition as well.
A huge connection. You really can't overstate it. The shift to green energy is fundamentally tied to REE availability.
In what way specifically?
Well, high-efficiency solar panels need them, high-capacity batteries for storing energy, they rely on them, and those powerful magnets we mentioned for EVs.
Yeah.
They're also key components in the big direct-drive wind turbines that are becoming more common.
Yeah.
So if we're serious about a sustainable future, we need these materials. Simple as that.
That's a crucial point, especially for anyone tracking, climate policy and tech development.
Definitely.
So from phones to fighter jets to wind farms, these elements are everywhere, strategically speaking.
That's the core issue. Because they're in so many critical things, and because the supply is so heavily concentrated mostly in China, they've become strategically vital for economic stability, for national security.
Right. Okay, so we understand why they matter.
Yeah.
Let's get into the current crisis itself, this Chinese export halt. What kind of global fallout are we actually expecting?
Well, given that China refines something like, 85%, maybe more, of the world's REs?
85%? Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge share. So stopping exports is widely expected to cause a pretty significant global supply crunch.
And who gets hit hardest?
The Indian Express report specifically flags the U.S., Japan, Vietnam, and Germany as countries likely to feel a major impact. They're heavily reliant on these imports.
Major economies, major tech hubs. Are some of them maybe better prepared than others?
That's an interesting point. The report does mention that some Japanese companies saw this kind of risk coming.
Oh, yeah. What did they do?
Apparently, some have stockpiled enough inventory to last over a year, which suggests, preparedness levels really vary.
That's some serious foresight. Seems essential, really. And this isn't the first time China's used REs like this, is it?
No, absolutely not. That's really important context. Back in 2010, there was a territorial dispute.
I remember that. With Japan, right?
Exactly. And China imposed an export ban on REs then, too. That was a huge wake-up call for the world about relying so heavily on one source.
Right. It really pushed diversification efforts, didn't it?
It did. And as the Indian Express also points out, there's a more recent pattern, too. Between 2023 and 2025, China put export restrictions on other materials like gallium, germanium, graphite, tungsten.
Also targeting the U.S.
Primarily, yes. It shows a willingness to use resource control as, well, a geopolitical lever.
So this current halt seems to fit into that broader strategy, which makes sense why countries are scrambling now to find alternatives, to become more self-reliant. But how easy is that really?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's really tough.
Why is it so difficult?
Well, many countries are trying to develop domestic mining and processing. But breaking China's dominance, that's a huge challenge.
Because they just have more deposits.
Not just that. China has invested heavily for decades and built up massive expertise, especially in the refining part. Separating these 17 chemically similar elements, it's complex.
The processing technology.
Exactly. It needs specialized facilities, know-how. China has a big head start there. It's not just about finding the rocks. It's about having the sophisticated factories to process them efficiently at scale.
Yeah, building that from scratch sounds like a massive long-term project, huge investment, lots of R&D needed.
Precisely.
Now, the Indian Express article also talks about India's situation. How is India likely to be affected by this?
Interestingly, the assessment seems to be that India will likely face relatively minimal disruption right now.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
It's mainly down to India's current domestic consumption being, well, relatively moderate, though it's important to note demand is increasing steadily.
As India's economy and tech sector grow.
Exactly. So for anyone looking at India's growth trajectory, maybe UPSC aspirants, understanding this rising demand is definitely key.
Okay, so lower immediate need. But India still imports some REEs, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In the last fiscal year, 2023-24, India imported about 2,270 tons.
And is that figure growing?
It is. That's actually up about 23% compared to 2019-20. So there's definitely a trend of increasing reliance.
And where are those imports coming from mainly?
Well, roughly 65% came from China, another 10% or so from Hong Kong.
Okay, so while the immediate hit might be softer, there's still that significant dependence on China building up. What about India's own production capacity?
India does have some capacity, yes, through the state-owned company IRL Ltd.
And how much can they produce?
Their current facility can process over 10,000 tons of rare earth oxides per year.
10,000 tons. How does that compare to, say, China?
Well, China's estimated refining capacity in 2023 was around 200,000 tons.
200,000. Wow, okay, that's a huge difference in scale.
It really is. India's domestic production is, much smaller than its imports currently and vastly smaller than China's output. So definitely an area for potential strategic focus going forward.
Right. So India might be weathering the immediate storm, but long-term self-sufficiency is clearly another story.
Yeah.
What about global responses? The article mentioned exploring alternatives.
Yes. Several things are being looked at. One big one is the U.S. push towards deep sea mining.
Mining the seabed.
Yeah. The previous Trump administration even drafted an order to stockpile REs mined from the Pacific seabed. The whole idea is to reduce that reliance on China for critical minerals, including, battery materials.
Deep sea mining. Sounds ambitious.
Yeah.
And probably controversial.
Very much so. China has already voiced strong opposition. They're emphasizing adherence to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, oversight by the International Seabed Authority.
So even finding alternatives gets tangled in geopolitics and international law.
Absolutely. It's never just a simple technical fix. For those studying international relations or resource management, perhaps for UPSC, this is a really interesting dynamic.
Definitely. And India's also looking at the seabed, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Just last November, India auctioned off 7 seabed blocks in the Andaman Sea region.
What are they hoping to find there?
These areas are known to be rich in things called polymetallic nodules and crusts, and these can contain valuable, heavy, rare earth elements.
So India is actively exploring that avenue too. Interesting.
It signals a proactive approach, looking for alternative sources for future needs.
Okay, so let's try and sum this up. China's REE export halt. It's clearly a big deal with broad impacts. Technology, defense, green energy, all affected.
And it really highlights the vulnerability that comes from having supply chains so heavily concentrated in one place.
Right. And while some countries might be, slightly better prepared with stockpiles, true self-reliance seems like a really complex, long-term challenge for most.
Definitely not an overnight fix.
India seems less immediately hit, for now, due to current consumption levels, but is also looking at alternatives like that seabed exploration.
That captures it well. And what's really striking here, especially maybe for listeners preparing for exams like the UPSC, is how this whole situation just perfectly illustrates the complex web of global supply chains.
And the growing competition for critical materials in our tech-driven world.
Exactly.
It really makes you think. Given how interconnected everything is and how demand for these things is only going up, what are the longer-term consequences here, geopolitically, economically?
How will countries adapt? What innovations might emerge to secure access?
It does feel like a potential turning point in global resource politics, doesn't it?
It really does. And that leads to a crucial point especially for our listeners focused on UPSC preparation. Think about how this episode reflects these bigger trends.
Like resource nationalism.
Yes, and the intense competition over critical technologies. And crucially, what strategic choices does India face in this changing global picture to protect its own economic and security interests?
Understanding these dependencies, the vulnerabilities, the potential strategies, it's essential for grasping India's place in the world moving forward.
Absolutely critical.
Well, if you found this deep dive useful for understanding this really important issue, please do hit like and subscribe for more discussions like this.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts or any further questions in the comments below.
And just a reminder, our discussion today was based on reporting from the Indian Express. Thanks so much for joining us on the deep dive.